The red and blue reflections bounced across my garage door like a strobe light from hell. Not the kind of morning you want when you're barefoot in your driveway at 6:12 a.m., coffee still cold in your hand. Not the kind of morning that begins with a $200 per day fine notice, pasted on your mailbox like a scarlet letter. Violation, unauthorized appliance operation. Garage refrigeration unit. I stared at it, blinked once, then twice. The hum from the fridge behind me sounded like a mocking heartbeat. 6 years it had been there, quietly chilling beer and leftovers. 6 years without a word from Marla Hensley, HOA board president, tyrant of beige blinds and mailbox spacing. And yet, today, she was suddenly obsessed with it. Across the street, her own house was a chaos of flashing lights. 2 police cruisers idled at the curb while Marla argued in clipped tones with a man in a dark windbreaker, Detective Alvarez, if I was guessing correctly. She hadn't even glanced in my direction. Not once. A pounding at the front door jolted me. I opened it to find her standing there, clipboard clutched like a weapon. Her smile was sharp, strained, like it had been carved from porcelain. "Daniel," she said, voice taut, "this is a formal notice. You are in violation. Power draw issues. Fire hazard. You know the rules." I rubbed my eyes. "What power draw?" "It's a fridge." She waved the clipboard like it might bite. "Fines start tomorrow. $200 per day. Until removed." "Tomorrow?" "No. Today was tomorrow." I glanced back at the fridge, innocently humming away in my garage, wires neat, temperature stable. And yet somehow, this was her target. Inside, Nora was at the kitchen window, watching the street. "You all right?" she asked. "I just got fined again," I said. "For what?" "For the fridge," I replied, feeling the absurdity press down on me like wet cement. She frowned. "Then why are the police over there?" "Good question." By 7 a.m., the neighborhood was awake. Curtains twitched, phones came out, and whispers ran down the cul-de-sac. Marla's voice rang out, sharp and shrill, punctuated by the officer's calm tones. She looked frustrated, off balance, which I had never seen. At 8:14 a.m., my doorbell rang. Detective Alvarez. Mid-40s, calm, precise, eyes that could cut through bullshit. "Daniel Mercer?" "Yes." "You own the blue sedan and the detached garage with the secondary power line?" "Yes." "We'd like to ask about your relationship with your HOA president." I hesitated. "Define relationship." "Disputes. Complaints. Financial conflicts." I sighed. "She fines me constantly." "For what?" I held up the notice. "This time?" "A fridge." He read it slowly. His face twitched ever so slightly. "Not surprise. Recognition. Confirmation. Mind if we step inside?" Inside, Nora perched at the kitchen table, trying to seem casual, but her fingers drummed against the wood like a time bomb. Alvarez began with basic questions about Marla's behavior, the fines, the escalating conflicts. I told him everything, from the mailbox spacing citation to the blinds violation, to the relentless nitpicking about parking spots. "And the fridge?" he asked. "She walked into my garage without permission last night," I said. "Claimed it was a hazard. Took photos. Wrote the fine. That's it." His gaze lingered. "She entered your private garage?" "Yes." "And did she have access to your electrical panel at any point?" "No." "Ever asked for access?" I thought back. 3 months ago, the energy audit. She had wanted to inspect power usage in my garage. I refused. He nodded slowly. "We have reason to believe your fridge may have been part of a larger scheme." The words hung in the air. A scheme. Not a fine. Not petty HOA harassment. Something larger, more deliberate. By that afternoon, the cops were swarming her house across the street. The news trickled down the cul-de-sac like wildfire. Thermal scans, hidden compartments, and eventually, stacks of cash. Marla Hensley, the pristine HOA queen, had been hoarding hundreds of thousands of dollars in undeclared cash, some in insulated containers, some in freezers. I sat back on the couch, stomach tight. My fridge, my innocent, humming fridge, had suddenly become a pawn in a much darker game. Nora, finally understanding the gravity, leaned over. "You mean, she was targeting you to get to the money?" "Yes." "And now, she's caught?" "Caught," I repeated, but the word tasted hollow. "But she wasn't acting alone. This was a network. A chain." Alvarez's voice cut through the tension. "We believe she had multiple nodes in the neighborhood. Your refusal may have disrupted her operations." The implication was clear. My fridge, my small act of defiance, had made me a key witness, maybe a target, in a dangerous game that extended far beyond HOA fines. Later, as the sun dipped low, I watched the cul-de-sac from my porch. Shadows stretched across the asphalt. The hum of my fridge was a low, constant thrum, like a heartbeat, or a warning. And somewhere, in the darkened corners of the neighborhood, someone was already plotting the next move. Because this wasn't about a fridge. It was about control. And I had just told Marla, in my own silent way, that I wouldn't comply. The morning after Marla's arrest, the street felt too quiet. Too ordinary. Sunlight poured over perfectly mown lawns, kids' bicycles leaned against fences, sprinklers hissed, all the suburban cliches, but none of it could erase the weight of what had happened. Detective Alvarez had warned me, the arrest of Marla Hensley was only the beginning. "I've never seen anything like this in a neighborhood HOA context," Alvarez said, leaning against my kitchen counter. "She was just a node. There's a bigger network, and you've stumbled right into it." I rubbed my temples. Coffee steamed in front of me, untouched. "You're saying she didn't act alone?" "Exactly," he said, eyes narrowing. "Someone else orchestrated the cash flow. And your garage fridge may have been the linchpin." I stared at it. The hum sounded different now, like it had secrets. All this time, I thought it was just a fridge. But it had become a key part of a criminal system hidden in plain sight. Over the next 48 hours, Nora and I went into detective mode ourselves. We combed through every email from the HOA board, every meeting note, every fine letter. Patterns emerged. Rules had suddenly been rewritten, seemingly overnight, always targeting the smallest compliance loopholes in my garage. The energy audit, the power draw warnings, the insistence on immediate access, all perfectly timed. Marla's notes, Alvarez confirmed, weren't just meticulous. They were surgical. She had created a system that forced compliance while keeping herself legally untouchable until someone like me refused. "That's the thing," Alvarez said during our second visit. "Most people just pay the fines. They don't fight back. And that allows her to rotate cash, undetected." I felt a chill. That meant I wasn't just resisting petty tyranny, I had inadvertently disrupted a multi-layered laundering operation. By late afternoon, Alvarez handed me thermal scans taken from Marla's house. The images revealed insulated cavities behind walls, under staircases, even in her garage attic, all designed to mask heat signatures from surveillance. She had over $480,000 in cash stacked in these compartments. No banks. No wires. Physical cash, constantly shuffled, hidden under layers of legality and community trust. "This is insane," I whispered. "And she tried to get my fridge for the same reason?" Alvarez nodded. "You shared a subgrid with her insulated network. If she had gained access, she could have rotated funds directly through your garage without detection." I sank into a chair. The hum of my fridge felt ominous, almost conspiratorial. The next move was mine. I had to understand the system before it hit me again. With Alvarez's guidance, I reconnected the fridge to power and installed a monitoring device on its circuit. It wouldn't just record electricity draw, it would timestamp any unusual surges, alerting me to potential interference or tampering. The first night, nothing happened. The second night, at exactly 2:11 a.m., my security camera pinged. A shadow moved along the side door. Hooded, silent, deliberate. I grabbed my phone and called Alvarez. By the time the police arrived, the figure had vanished, leaving only a fresh tamper mark on the lock. My stomach churned. Whoever it was, they weren't amateurs. They knew the network. They knew exactly what they were looking for. Over the next week, Nora and I compiled evidence. Emails showing selective finds, photos of altered utility meters, timestamps aligning suspicious energy spikes with Marla's scheduled inspections. Every piece of data pointed toward a deliberate pattern of coercion and concealment, designed to integrate neighborhood properties into a cash rotation scheme. And then came the breakthrough. I found an archived email thread where Marla instructed the HOA treasurer to report emergency inspections to selected homes in sequence, almost like clockwork. A few lines in the message stood out. Ensure the subject does not resist. Rotate cold storage. Minimal trace. Confidential. Alvarez's face went pale when I showed it to him. This confirms it. She wasn't just hiding cash for herself, she was orchestrating a network across multiple households. That night, as we pored over floor plans of Marla's house and mine, my fridge hummed like a pulse in the dark. I realized it had become a trap for her enemies. Whoever wanted the network intact would come for it next. Sure enough, the monitoring device went off again 2 nights later. This time, the surge was traced not to my house, but across the cul-de-sac. Someone activated a subgrid line linking multiple homes. Alvarez's expression told me everything. They were checking to see if the network was still operational. Daniel, he said quietly, you may have just disrupted a multi-node laundering system. And they know it. The implication was terrifying. Not only was I a target, but anyone in the neighborhood could be implicated. I couldn't just wait. I had to dig deeper, identify the nodes, and secure the evidence. Over the next 3 days, we tracked the signals, compared HOA board emails with thermal scans, and mapped potential caches of cash. Each new discovery widened the conspiracy. The further we looked, the more it became clear, Marla had been a pawn, not the mastermind. Someone else, someone invisible, had designed this network from above, using HOA authority as camouflage. By the 4th day, Alvarez instructed me to document everything meticulously. Photos of tamper marks, logs of energy surges, copies of email threads. Each piece was a thread leading to a much larger puzzle. Nora, usually calm under pressure, admitted she was scared. Daniel, do you realize how deep this goes? I swallowed hard. I know. But now we have a chance to stop it before someone comes for us. That night, I watched the cul-de-sac in silence. The streetlights flickered. The hum of my fridge was louder than ever. Somewhere, in the shadows, the network's orchestrator was already plotting their next move. And I knew this was only the beginning. The HOA emergency meeting was scheduled for Friday at 6 p.m., and the timing couldn't have been more perfect. It was public, mandatory, and heavily attended, exactly the stage I needed. The clubhouse smelled faintly of varnish and coffee, a bland suburban scent that could never mask the tension vibrating through the air. Chairs creaked as homeowners settled in. Some whispered nervously, others glanced at the podium with curiosity. And there she was, Marla Hensley, seated front and center, the self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood, flanked by her attorney and a few loyal supporters. Her heels tapped against the floor like a countdown. She caught my eye and smiled. A predator's smile. Bad move. I swallowed my anxiety and walked to the podium, heart hammering but voice steady. My name is Daniel Mercer, I began. And tonight, I'm here to talk about something far bigger than HOA fines. A ripple of murmurs passed through the room. Marla's smile faltered ever so slightly. I'm here to expose a criminal network operating under the guise of HOA authority, I continued, lifting my laptop to connect it to the projector. A network designed to conceal and rotate large amounts of cash using insulated refrigeration units in neighborhood homes. Gasps. Some people covered their mouths. Others looked around, incredulous. Marla laughed, sharp and brittle. This is harassment, she snapped. Baseless accusations from a disgruntled neighbor. I've done nothing wrong. I clicked the remote. The screen lit up with thermal images of hidden cavities, timestamps, and graphs showing energy surges aligned with her inspection schedule. Each slide punctuated her lies with cold, undeniable evidence. Every inspection, every fine, I said, voice rising with quiet authority, was part of a larger scheme to coerce residents into compliance, allowing her to rotate concealed funds undetected. And this, I added, pointing to a close-up of my garage fridge subgrid on the screen, was the next node in that chain. Whispers turned into stunned silence. Alvarez stepped forward from the back. "Miss Hensley," he said, calm but firm, "you are in violation of your bond conditions. You attempted to coordinate the concealment of cash remotely, and we have evidence linking you to multiple offenses." Her attorney stuttered, attempting to interject, but the room was electrified with tension. Every eye was on Marla. And then, she moved. She bolted. Not toward the exit, but toward the projector, trying to disconnect it. A man behind her lunged for the console, perhaps an accomplice, but Alvarez reacted instantly. Within seconds, the man was tackled to the ground, the projector still streaming images of Marla's operations. The room erupted into chaos. Chairs toppled, shouts echoed, but the calm, precise training of Alvarez and his team kept order. One of Marla's associates made a break for the doors, but Nora, quick thinking, pulled the emergency shutter lever by the back exit. Steel panels slammed down with a clang, sealing the room. Panic morphed into disbelief as the realization set in: there was no escape. Marla sank into her chair, the fight draining from her eyes. Her pristine appearance, the perfectly tailored suit, the sharp haircut, could not mask the fear creeping across her face. She glanced at me, and for the first time, I saw real vulnerability. "You don't even know who you just touched," she whispered, almost pleading. "Yes," I said quietly, feeling the weight of the moment. "But your network is over." Alvarez cuffed her gently but firmly, reading her rights in a tone that brooked no argument. Around us, neighbors stared, some horrified, others in awe. The revelation that their HOA had been a front for cash smuggling sent shockwaves through the room. By the time it was over, Marla was taken away. Her co-conspirators were detained, and the evidence secure. The screen still displayed thermal scans, now empty, but the message was clear: the illusion of suburban normalcy had been shattered. And yet, even in that moment of triumph, a deeper realization settled over me like a shadow. Marla had been meticulous, yes, but she had always been a node, not the mastermind. Someone higher up, someone invisible, had orchestrated the operation. And I had no idea how far it reached. Neighbors approached, shaking hands, some offering tentative congratulations. "Thank you for standing up," one woman whispered. A man patted me on the shoulder. Relief mixed with fear, the realization that our quiet neighborhood had been a chessboard for criminals was not easy to digest. Alvarez stayed behind after the meeting, scanning the perimeter. "The arrests tonight," he said, "don't close the case. They're part of a bigger picture. The top tier of this network is still out there. Likely monitoring, planning, waiting." I nodded, exhausted but alert. My mind raced, replaying every encounter, every fine, every subtle manipulation. Every detail that had seemed trivial now had context. Every inspection, every energy audit, was part of a carefully orchestrated system. And I had just disrupted it. Nora approached, holding my hand. "We did it," she said softly. But even in her words, I could hear the tension, the knowledge that this wasn't over. Later, back at our house, the street seemed quieter than ever. The shadows seemed longer, darker. The hum of my fridge filled the garage with an almost menacing presence, a reminder that it had been at the center of this operation. I disconnected the monitoring device but left the fridge running. Its soft, persistent hum was a signal, a heartbeat marking the end of one phase and the uncertainty of the next. Somewhere out there, the mastermind was still moving. Watching. Waiting. And now, they knew I was aware. As I looked out the window at the cul-de-sac, the weight of responsibility settled over me. What had begun as a petty dispute over a refrigerator had evolved into a high-stakes battle against a hidden network, one that could touch anyone in the neighborhood, anyone who unknowingly shared the same infrastructure. And the thought that kept me awake that night wasn't just fear. It was the terrifying certainty that tonight's confrontation was only the opening act. The real game, the real danger, was still out there, invisible, and far more dangerous than anyone could imagine. The streets felt almost normal again. Mornings smelled like freshly cut grass and brewed coffee, sprinklers hissed, and children's laughter carried across lawns. On the surface, everything had returned to suburban tranquility. But beneath the calm, there was a quiet tension, the knowledge that the neighborhood had survived a storm, and that the storm might not yet be over. Marla Hensley had been taken into federal custody, her plea deal negotiated swiftly. The courts moved with a surprising efficiency, given the volume of evidence, thermal scans, energy logs, emails, witness statements. The fines she had imposed on residents were refunded, HOA records scrubbed of her influence, and the board dissolved entirely. Neighbors approached us cautiously, some with gratitude, others with quiet suspicion. The revelations had shaken everyone's sense of trust. Front yard conversations buzzed with half-formed theories, whispered suspicions, and gratitude for my refusal to comply. "You really saved us a lot of trouble, Mrs. Larkin, from 3 houses down," said one afternoon, clutching a reusable grocery bag. I didn't know what was happening until it all came out. We just went along with it. I nodded, keeping my own relief in check. The truth weighed heavier than gratitude. "It wasn't just me," I said. Detective Alvarez and a few others made sure this didn't get out of control. By midweek, I returned to normal routines, as normal as one could after uncovering a neighborhood criminal network. I walked the dog, checked the mail, and even opened the garage fridge without hesitation. Its soft hum had become a kind of reassurance, a heartbeat in a house that had seen too much. Nora was more cautious. She had kept meticulous notes throughout the investigation and had compiled them into a detailed file for Alvarez. Now, she scanned the cul-de-sac nightly, watching for shadows, listening for anything unusual. One evening, Alvarez stopped by. His usual calm demeanor was slightly less controlled than usual, a subtle tension around his eyes. "We closed Marla's chapter," he said, "but the network isn't finished. Marla was a mid-level node. The top tier is still active, still observing." I felt a chill. "How do you know?" He handed me a single photo, a shipping container yard on the outskirts of the city, dimly lit at night. My address had been circled in faint red ink, buried in a logistics manifest linked to refrigerated freight shipments. "Your fridge," Alvarez said quietly, "wasn't the only cold box in the system." The image of my suburban street juxtaposed against industrial-scale freight operations was jarring. It revealed that Marla's local scheme was part of a larger, organized network, likely spanning cities, perhaps even states. I placed the photo in my desk drawer. Its weight pressed down on me like a warning. The community had celebrated our victory, but I knew the real danger was invisible, waiting, patient, and watching. Over the next few weeks, life resumed a semblance of normality. Block parties returned, the HOA dissolved, and neighbors started talking again without fear. Yet, at night, I remained vigilant. One night, I noticed a delivery truck parked briefly outside our cul-de-sac. It didn't stop. The refrigeration unit hummed quietly, almost imperceptibly, as it passed. My stomach tightened. The hum of my own garage fridge seemed to echo that distant vibration. I didn't call Alvarez immediately. I watched, waited, noting the license plate, the timing, the route. Whoever was behind this network knew I was aware. They were testing, probing, learning my patterns. The psychological weight was relentless. It was no longer just about fines or cash concealment, it was control, surveillance, influence. And the reminder was subtle, almost playful, like the quiet hum of a predator circling its prey. Nora tried to keep the mood light, suggesting we plant flowers along the driveway, repaint the fence, and reclaim our sense of normality. We did it, laughing occasionally, but the tension never fully lifted. Every unexpected car, every knock on the door, triggered a fleeting spike of anxiety. One evening, as I reviewed the shipment manifest again, something new caught my eye: a code repeated across multiple entries, Cold Note X23. It didn't match any addresses I knew, but the designation implied systematic organization, far beyond Marla's local operations. Alvarez warned me during a late-night call. This isn't just about the neighborhood anymore. That code you found could indicate another node in another city linked to the same network. And they've adapted. They're careful, patient, waiting for mistakes. I nodded quietly, the weight settling in. I realized that while the neighborhood had healed, fines refunded, HOA dissolved, Marla imprisoned, the game had shifted to a higher, more dangerous level. My victory was small, relative to the unseen power still moving in the shadows. Yet there was one small comfort. My fridge remained intact, humming steadily in the garage. It was mundane, ordinary. Yet its presence was symbolic, a small, defiant stand against a much larger machine, a reminder that sometimes courage doesn't need explosives or force, only perseverance. As I turned off the garage light that night, the last image in my mind was the shipping container yard, the circle address, and the soft, insistent hum of the refrigerator. Somewhere out there, someone or something was still watching. Waiting. Planning. And that thought kept me awake longer than any siren, any threat, or any HOA violation ever had. The neighborhood had survived, but the real enemy was still out there, invisible, patient, and cold, like the hum of a refrigerator in the dead of night.